David never believed in aliens, not until that Tuesday night when his whole world changed forever. He was a regular guy who studied stars and planets at the university. Nothing special about him, really, just someone who loved looking up at the night sky and wondering what was out there. His job was simple: use the big telescope at the observatory on the hill and write down what he saw. Most nights were quiet, just him and the stars. That particular evening felt different, though. The air seemed thicker, almost electric. David had been working alone for 3 hours when he noticed something strange. There were lights moving in the sky, but they weren't like any airplane or satellite he'd ever seen. These lights danced and swirled, creating patterns that made no sense. He rubbed his eyes, thinking maybe he was just tired. But when he looked again, the lights were still there, getting brighter and bigger. His heart started beating faster as he realized these weren't normal lights at all. David quickly adjusted his telescope to get a better look. The moment he focused on the strange lights, everything around him went silent. Even the usual night sounds, crickets, wind through the trees, distant cars, just stopped. It was like someone had pressed a mute button on the entire world. Then came the beam of light. It was unlike anything he'd ever seen. Pure white, but somehow warm and inviting rather than harsh. The light surrounded him completely, and he felt his feet leave the ground. He wanted to scream, but no sound came out. His body felt weightless, like he was floating in water. The last thing he remembered was the feeling of moving upward, faster and faster, until the observatory below looked like a tiny dot. When David opened his eyes, he was somewhere else entirely. The first thing he noticed was how quiet it was, but not the scary kind of quiet from before. This was peaceful, like being in a library or a church. He was lying on something soft that seemed to glow with a gentle blue light. The room around him was incredible. The walls curved and flowed like they were made of liquid, but they were solid when he touched them. Everything glowed softly. The floor, the ceiling, even the air itself seemed to shimmer. There were no sharp corners anywhere, just smooth, flowing shapes that somehow felt alive. David tried to sit up and realized he could move freely. Whatever had been holding him was gone. He stood up slowly, his legs a bit shaky, and looked around in wonder. The room was beautiful in a way that made his chest feel tight with emotion. That's when he saw her. She was standing near what looked like a window, but instead of glass, it was just an opening that somehow kept the air inside. She was tall and graceful, with skin that seemed to catch light and reflect it back in the softest way. Her hair was long and moved like it was underwater, even though there was no wind. But it was her eyes that took his breath away. They were like looking at stars, bright and deep and full of intelligence. When she looked at him, he felt like she could see right into his soul. She turned toward him and smiled, and David felt his fear melting away. Her smile was warm and genuine, nothing like what he'd expected from an alien. She looked almost human, but there was something otherworldly about her that made her incredibly beautiful. Then she spoke, but not with her mouth. Her voice appeared directly in his mind, clear as if she were standing right next to him. "Please, don't be afraid," her voice said inside his head. "I know this is confusing, but you're safe here. My name is Zara." David opened his mouth to speak, but only managed to make a small croaking sound. He cleared his throat and tried again. "Where am I? What happened to me?" Zara's expression became gentle, almost sad. "You're on my ship. We're traveling through space, far from your Earth. I brought you here because I needed to meet you. Meet me. But why me? I'm nobody special." She tilted her head, and her hair caught the light in a way that made it look like liquid silver. "That's where you're wrong. You are very special, David. You're mine, the way you think and feel. It's exactly what I've been searching for." David felt dizzy. This was all too much to process. "Are you going to hurt me?" "Never," Zara said quickly, and he could hear the sincerity in her mental voice. "I would never hurt you. I brought you here because I need your help, and I believe you might need mine too." She moved closer, and David noticed she seemed to glide rather than walk. Everything about her movements was fluid and graceful. When she was just a few feet away, she stopped and looked directly into his eyes. I know you have questions. I know you're scared and confused. But I promise you, everything will make sense soon. Will you let me explain? David looked around the beautiful, impossible room, then back at Zara. Her eyes were so kind, so full of intelligence and something else, loneliness, maybe, despite everything. He found himself nodding. Okay, he said quietly. I'm listening. Zara's smile returned, brighter this time. Thank you. Let me start by showing you something wonderful. She gestured toward the window opening, and David walked over to look out. What he saw took his breath away completely. They were in space, surrounded by stars that looked close enough to touch. But these weren't the stars he knew from Earth. These were bigger, brighter. Some were different colors, purple, green, gold. And in the distance, he could see other ships, elegant and beautiful, moving through the darkness like dancers. This is my world, Zara said, standing beside him. Well, not exactly my world, but my people's domain. We travel between stars, learning about the universe and all the life it contains. David stared out at the incredible view. It's beautiful. I never imagined anything like this. Your people will see sights like this someday, Zara said. But that's not why you're here. You're here because of something much more important, something that could change both our worlds. She turned to face him, and David saw something in her expression that surprised him. She looked nervous, almost vulnerable. David, what I'm about to tell you might sound strange, but my people are dying, not from disease or war, but from something much worse. We're forgetting how to feel. David frowned. What do you mean? We've become so focused on logic and efficiency that we've lost touch with emotions. We don't laugh anymore. We don't cry. We don't dream. And without those things, we're slowly disappearing as a species. She paused, looking out at the stars. That's why I've been studying humans, your emotions, your dreams, your ability to hope, and love and create. These are things my people have forgotten. And you, David, you have the strongest emotional patterns I've ever encountered. David felt his heart racing. So what does that mean for me? Zara turned back to him, and for the first time, she looked uncertain. It means I need to understand you, to learn from you. And I'm hoping that maybe, just maybe, you might want to learn from me too. As David looked into her star-bright eyes, he realized something that shocked him. For the first time in his life, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The fear was still there, but it was mixed with something else now, excitement, curiosity, and a strange sense of belonging. How long do I have to decide? He asked. Zara's expression softened. As long as you need. But David, I should tell you something else. What? Once you understand what I'm really offering you, you might not want to leave. And as David looked out at the impossible beauty of space, with this amazing being beside him, he began to think she might be right. 3 days had passed since David first woke up on Zara's ship, and he was starting to realize that everything he thought he knew about the universe was wrong. The ship itself was like nothing he could have imagined. It wasn't just a machine. It was alive in ways that made his head spin. The walls would change color based on his mood. When he felt sad or homesick, they would glow with warm, comforting colors like sunset orange and soft yellow. When he was excited or curious, they would shimmer with cool blues and purples. Zara explained that her people's technology was grown, not built. The ship was part plant, part machine, and part something else entirely that didn't have a word in any human language. It could sense his emotions and respond to them, trying to make him feel comfortable and at home. Your ship is reading my mind, David asked on his second day, watching the ceiling above his bed shift from silver to a gentle green. That reminded him of spring leaves. Not your thoughts, Zara said, sitting cross-legged on the floor beside his bed. Just your feelings. The ship wants to take care of you. It's like having a pet that's also your house. David laughed at that, and he noticed how Zara's eyes lit up when he did. She seemed fascinated by every expression he made, every emotion that crossed his face. What was that? She asked, leaning forward with intense curiosity. What was what? That sound you made. The way your face changed. You seemed happy, but also surprised. I was laughing, David said, still smiling. You've never heard laughter before. Zara shook her head, looking almost embarrassed. My people, don't laugh. We haven't for thousands of years. Can you teach me how? And so David found himself in the strangest situation of his life, teaching an alien how to laugh. He told her jokes, made funny faces, and shared stories from his childhood. That had always made him giggle. Zara listened with the intensity of a student studying for the most important test of her life. When she finally managed her first small laugh, a sound like wind chimes mixed with music, David felt his heart do something strange. It was like a warm feeling spreading through his chest, making him want to protect this amazing being who was discovering joy for the first time. The days that followed were filled with similar discoveries. Zara would ask him to explain emotions that her people had forgotten. What did it feel like to miss someone? How did hope work? What was the difference between being sad and being disappointed? David found himself sharing stories he'd never told anyone. He talked about his lonely childhood, how he'd always felt different from other kids because he preferred looking at stars to playing sports. He told her about his parents, who had died in a car accident when he was in college, and how he still sometimes reached for his phone to call them when something good happened. That's what you call grief, he explained one evening as they stood together at the ship's viewing window, watching a purple nebula drift past like cosmic smoke. It's love that has nowhere to go. Zara was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I think I understand now. We used to have a word for that feeling, but we stopped using it so long ago that it's been forgotten. What happened to your people? David asked, how did you lose all of this? Zara's expression grew sad, and David noticed that when she felt strong emotions, her skin would shimmer and change color slightly. Right now, she was glowing with a soft blue light that reminded him of moonlight. We became afraid, she said. Quietly, emotions made us do things that weren't logical. We fought wars over love, made terrible decisions because of anger, wasted resources on art and music and poetry. So our leaders decided that emotions were holding us back from becoming truly advanced. But you still have emotions, David pointed out. I can see them in you. Some of us kept them hidden, Zara admitted. We pretended to be logical and cold like everyone else, but inside we still felt things. That's why I became a researcher. I wanted to understand what we had lost. She turned to look at him, and David saw something in her eyes that made his breath catch. You're the first being I've ever met who experiences emotions the way we used to. Watching you, learning from you, it's like watching someone use a part of themselves that my people have forgotten existed. David felt that warm feeling in his chest again, stronger this time. What will happen when your research is done? I don't know, Zara said honestly. The plan was to study you, learn everything I could about human emotions, and then return you to your world. But what? She looked away, and David saw her skin shift to a deeper blue. But I'm discovering that emotions aren't just something you study from the outside. There's something you have to experience, and spending time with you, learning from you, it's changing me in ways I never expected. David moved closer to her, and he could see his own reflection in her star-bright eyes. How is it changing you? I'm feeling things I've never felt before, she whispered. When you're happy, I feel happy too. When you're sad, I want to comfort you. When you smile at me, my whole body feels warm and light. I don't think there's a word for what I'm experiencing. There is, David said softly. But it might scare you. Tell me. David took a deep breath. I think you're learning how to care about someone. How to love. Zara's eyes widened, and her skin began to glow brighter. Love, but that's impossible. My people say love is just chemical reactions in the brain. Nothing more. Maybe it starts that way, David said. But it becomes something bigger. It becomes wanting someone else to be happy, even if it means you have to sacrifice something. It becomes feeling like you're more yourself when you're with them than when you're alone. Zara stared at him, and David could see she was processing this information like it was the most important discovery of her life. Is that what you're feeling too? She asked quietly. David felt his heart racing. He'd been trying not to think about it, but the truth was becoming impossible to ignore. Over the past few days, he'd started looking forward to every moment with Zara. Her curiosity, her kindness, the way she listened to him like every word was precious. It was all making him feel things he'd never felt before. Yes, he admitted, I think I am. They stood there in silence, looking out at the stars, both of them trying to understand what was happening between them. David had been brought here as a research subject, but something much more important was developing. David, Zara said finally, I need to tell you something. My people are expecting me to return soon with my research. They want to know everything about human emotions so they can decide if emotions are worth bringing back to our society. And what will you tell them? Zara turned to face him fully, and David saw something in her expression that was both beautiful and terrifying. I'm going to tell them that emotions aren't just chemical reactions. They're what make life worth living. But David, I'm also going to tell them something else. What? I'm going to tell them that I can't be objective about my research anymore. Because I've fallen in love with my subject. David felt like his heart might burst. What does that mean for us? I don't know, Zara said, reaching out to touch his hand. Her skin was warm and soft, and David felt a tingle of electricity where they touched. But I do know one thing. Whatever happens next, I'm not the same person I was when I brought you here. You've changed me, David. You've given me back something my people lost long ago. David squeezed her hand gently. You've changed me too. I've spent my whole life feeling like I didn't fit in anywhere. But here, with you, I feel like I'm exactly where I belong. As they stood together, holding hands and looking out at the infinite beauty of space, David realized that his life had just taken a turn he never could have imagined. He was falling in love with an alien who was teaching him that the universe was far more beautiful and mysterious than he'd ever dreamed. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid of the future. He was excited to see what would happen next. David woke up to find Zara standing by the window, her skin glowing a dim silver color that he'd learned meant she was worried. Outside, he could see something that made his heart skip a beat. A massive structure floating in space, so big it looked like a city made of crystal and light. We're here, Zara said quietly, not turning around. This is my home. David got up and walked over to stand beside her. The space station was beautiful, but also intimidating. It was shaped like a flower made of metal and glass, with thousands of lights twinkling across its surface. Ships moved in and out of docking bays like busy bees around a hive. It's incredible, David said. But he noticed that Zara didn't seem excited to be home. If anything, she looked scared. David, we need to talk, she said, finally turning to face him. Before we dock, there are things you need to know. Things I should have told you before. But I was afraid. David felt his stomach drop. What kind of things? Zara walked over to a chair that seemed to grow out of the floor as she approached it. Everything on the ship was like that, responding to what was needed. She sat down and gestured for David to sit across from her. The real reason I brought you here, she began, her voice shaking slightly. It wasn't just to study human emotions. The Council of my people has a plan. What kind of plan? Zara took a deep breath. They want to use humans as a way to bring emotions back to our society. But not in the way you might think. They don't want to learn from you and then let you go. They want to keep you here, permanently, as a living example. David felt cold suddenly. What do you mean, keep me here? They want to study you, constantly, monitor your emotions, your reactions, your thoughts. They want to understand exactly how human feelings work so they can create artificial versions. For our people, you would live in a lab, David. You would never see Earth again. The words hit David like a punch to the chest, and you knew this the whole time. Yes, Zara whispered, tears forming in her eyes. David had never seen her cry before. I'm so sorry. I told myself it was for the greater good, that helping my people was worth it. But I never expected what? I never expected to fall in love with you. David stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the approaching station. His mind was racing. Everything he'd felt over the past week, the connection, the growing love, the sense of belonging, had it all been a lie? So what happens now? He asked, his voice flat. In 1 hour, we dock at the station. The council will take you to the research facility. I'll be expected to hand over all my notes about you, about your emotions, about everything we've shared together. David turned around. And then you'll spend the rest of your life in a cage, being studied like an animal, and I'll be reassigned to study other species, other worlds. We'll never see each other again. The ship suddenly felt very small and very cold. David sat back down and looked at Sarah, who was now crying openly. Her tears were different from human tears. They glowed softly like liquid starlight. There's something else, she said through her tears. Something I discovered about myself during this trip. What? The council thinks I've been contaminated by human emotions. They say I've become too attached to my subject to be objective. They're right, of course. I have been contaminated. But David, I don't care. These feelings, this love, it's the most real thing I've ever experienced. David felt his anger melting away. Looking at Zara, seeing how much she was suffering, he realized that she was as trapped as he was, maybe even more so. What happens to you? He asked. If they decide I'm contaminated, I'll be sent to a rehabilitation center. They'll remove my emotions, make me like the others, cold, logical, empty. She looked up at him. David, I'd rather die than go back to feeling nothing. They sat in silence for a moment, both of them trying to process what was happening. Then David had a thought. What if we don't dock? What do you mean? What if we just leave? Go somewhere else? Zara shook her head. They're tracking us. The moment we deviate from our course, they'll send ships to bring us back. Besides, where will we go? I don't have enough fuel to reach another inhabited system. David felt desperation building in his chest. There has to be something we can do. There's one possibility, Zara said slowly, but it's incredibly dangerous. And I don't know if it would work. Tell me. I've been working on something in secret, a way to share emotions between species without needing permanent subjects. I think I've found a way to create a bridge between human and alien consciousness. David leaned forward. What kind of bridge? If I could broadcast my emotional experiences with you to the entire council, show them what I've learned not just intellectually, but emotionally, it might change their minds. They could feel what I feel, understand what we've discovered together. That sounds perfect. Why is it dangerous? Zara's expression grew grave. Because to create that kind of connection, I would have to merge my consciousness with yours temporarily. If something goes wrong, we could both lose our minds, and even if it works, the council might see it as an even greater contamination. David thought about this. What are the chances it would work? I don't know. Maybe 50%, maybe less. And if we do nothing, then you spend your life in a lab, and I lose everything that makes me who I am. David looked out at the station again. It was getting closer, and he could see smaller ships moving toward them, probably an escort to make sure they docked as planned. Zara, he said, these past few days with you have been the best of my life. Back on Earth, I was lonely and going nowhere. I spent my nights looking at stars and wondering if there was more to life than what I had. David, let me finish. You've shown me wonders I never imagined. You've made me feel things I didn't know I could feel. You've given me purpose and love and hope. If there's a chance we can be together, really together, then I'm willing to take the risk. Zara stared at him. You would risk losing your mind. For me, I would risk everything for you. For us. Zara was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood up and walked to a panel on the wall. The docking will begin in 30 minutes. If we're going to do this, we need to start now. What do I need to do? Just trust me. And David, yeah? Whatever happens, I want you to know that meeting you, falling in love with you, it's been the most beautiful thing that's ever happened to me. You've made me more alive than I ever thought possible. David walked over to her and took her hands. You've done the same for me. Whatever happens next, we'll face it together. As alarms began to sound softly throughout the ship, indicating the approach to the station, David and Zara prepared to attempt something that had never been done before, a complete merging of human and alien consciousness. It was their only chance to stay together, but it might also destroy them both. Looking into Zara's starlight eyes, David knew he made the right choice. Some things were worth any risk, and love was definitely one of them. Ready? Zara asked, her hands glowing as she prepared to activate the consciousness bridge. Ready, David said, and meant it. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in his life, David was exactly where he wanted to be, fighting for love alongside the most amazing being he'd ever met. The consciousness bridge felt like drowning and flying at the same time. David's mind merged with Zara's, and suddenly he could see the universe through her eyes. Every emotion he'd ever felt was amplified 1,000 times, while her memories flooded through him like a rushing river. He saw her childhood on a world where no one smiled. He felt her loneliness growing up in a society where expressing feelings was forbidden. He experienced her excitement when she first discovered humans and realized they still had what her people had lost, and most powerfully, he felt her love for him, pure and overwhelming and beautiful beyond words. At the same time, Zara was experiencing David's memories, his lonely nights staring at stars, his grief over his parents, his joy at simple things like sunshine and music and laughter. She felt what it was like to be human, to live with such intense emotions every single day. The ship's systems responded to their merged consciousness, automatically broadcasting their shared experience to the approaching council ships. For the first time in thousands of years, the alien leaders were feeling genuine human emotions. But something went wrong. The mental connection was too intense. David felt like his mind was being torn apart, and he could sense Zara struggling too. They had underestimated how different their brain structures were. The bridge was collapsing, and if they didn't disconnect soon, they might both lose their sanity. David, Zara's voice echoed in his mind. We have to stop. Just as they began to pull apart, the ship lurched violently. They'd been caught by a tractor beam from the station. The council wasn't waiting for them to dock. They were being pulled in by force. The consciousness bridge shattered, leaving both of them gasping and disoriented. David's head felt like it was splitting open, but he could still feel traces of Zara's emotions flowing through him. She was clutching her head, her skin flickering between different colors as her body tried to process what had just happened. Did it work? David asked weakly. Before Zara could answer, their ship was surrounded by security vessels. Through the window, David could see alien beings in suits that looked like living armor, preparing to board their ship. I don't know, Zara said, her voice shaky. But we're about to find out. The ship shuddered as the security forces attached a boarding tube. Within minutes, the door slid open and 6 tall figures entered. They looked similar to Zara, but colder, their skin a dull gray color that never changed. Their eyes were flat and emotionless. The leader stepped forward and looked at David like he was studying an interesting insect. Subject: 7739, you will come with us immediately. His name is David, Zara said, standing up despite her obvious weakness. And he's not going anywhere. The leader turned to her with what might have been surprise. Researcher Zara, you have been compromised beyond acceptable parameters. You will also be detained for rehabilitation. No, Zara said firmly. I've made a discovery that changes everything. The council needs to see what I've learned. Your contamination has been noted. Any data you have collected is now suspect. Then explain this, Zara said, and suddenly pressed her hand against the ship's wall. The walls around them began to glow, and suddenly everyone in the room was experiencing David and Zara's shared memories. The security forces stumbled backward as emotions they hadn't felt in millennia crashed over them like waves. David watched in amazement as the cold, emotionless aliens began to change. One of them started crying. Another began laughing, a sound that was rusty and strange, like someone remembering how to use a muscle they'd forgotten they had. The leader fell to his knees, overwhelmed by the sensation of feeling joy for the first time in his life. What is this? The leader gasped. This is what we used to be, Zara said. This is what we lost when we chose logic over love, efficiency over emotion. David didn't just teach me about human feelings, he helped me remember our own. The security forces were in chaos. Some were laughing, some were crying. Some were just standing there with expressions of wonder on their faces. It was like watching statues come to life, but the effect was temporary. As the ship's broadcasting system shut down, the aliens slowly returned to their emotionless state. The leader stood up, his face once again cold and blank. Interesting, he said, but irrelevant. Emotions are weakness. They lead to chaos and inefficiency. You're wrong, David said, stepping forward. Emotions aren't weakness. They're what make life worth living. They're what drive us to create, to explore, to love. Without them, you're not really alive at all. The leader studied David for a moment. You will have the opportunity to prove that theory. In the laboratory, wait, Zara said. There's something else, something the council needs to know. She walked to the ship's control panel and activated a hidden recording system. Suddenly, the room filled with images, dozens of them, showing other humans who had been brought to the alien station over the years. David's heart sank as he saw them. They were in glass cages, connected to monitoring equipment, but they weren't the vibrant, emotional beings they once were. They looked empty, hollow, like shells of their former selves. This is what your research has accomplished, Zara said. You've destroyed the very thing you were trying to study. These humans have lost their humanity because of your methods. The leader looked at the images without emotion. Acceptable losses for the greater good. No, Zara said, her voice growing stronger. This is exactly why emotions matter. They help us understand that other beings have value, that their suffering matters. Without emotions, you can justify anything. David felt anger building in his chest. These beings had taken humans from their families, destroyed their minds, all in the name of research. You're monsters, he said. We are logical, the leader replied. Emotions cloud judgment. Then judge this, Zara said, and pressed another control. The ship's systems activated one final time, broadcasting not just to the security forces, but to the entire station. Every alien within range suddenly experienced the full range of human emotions: love, grief, joy, compassion, anger, hope. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Across the station, aliens who hadn't felt anything in thousands of years were suddenly crying, laughing, embracing each other. Some were confused and frightened, but others were experiencing wonder and joy for the first time in their lives. The leader staggered, overwhelmed by the emotional feedback from thousands of his people. What have you done? He gasped. I've given them back their souls, Zara said, and now they'll have to decide what to do with them. Through the window, David could see chaos spreading across the station. But it wasn't destructive chaos. It was the chaos of people waking up after a long sleep, remembering who they used to be. The leader looked around at his security forces, who were now hugging each other and laughing through their tears. This is unacceptable, or must be restored. Try, Zara said. Try to convince beings who are feeling love and joy for the first time in millennia to go back to being empty. Try to tell them that feeling nothing is better than feeling everything. The leader activated his communication device, probably trying to call for backup. But David could hear the voices coming through. Other aliens, all of them experiencing emotions. All of them talking at once about the incredible sensations they were feeling. The council must decide, the leader said finally. This situation requires immediate attention. Then let's go see them, David said. Let's see if they can make logical decisions when their hearts are finally working again. As they prepared to leave the ship, Zara grabbed David's hand. Whatever happens next, I want you to know that I'm proud of what we've done. We've given my people a choice they haven't had in thousands of years. David squeezed her hand. And whatever they choose, we'll face it together. Looking out at the station, now blazing with lights and activity as its inhabitants rediscovered their emotions, David realized that their desperate gamble had worked better than they'd ever hoped. The question now was whether the council would see their newfound emotions as a gift or a curse. Either way, David and Zara had started a revolution, and there was no going back. 6 months later, David stood on the observation deck of their new home, watching 3 different suns set over a world that shouldn't exist but somehow did. The planet had no name in any official records. It was just a small, forgotten world, on the edge of known space. But to David and Zara, it was paradise. They weren't alone here. The station was now home to over 100 beings from dozens of different species, all of them refugees or outcasts or explorers who had found their way to this little corner of the universe. It had become a place where different forms of life could meet and learn from each other without fear. "The supply ship is coming in," Zara said, walking up behind him and wrapping her arms around his waist. Her skin was glowing with the soft golden light that David had learned meant she was completely happy. "Any word from your homeworld?" David asked, leaning back against her. "Better than word. 3 more ships arrived today, full of volunteers who want to join us. The emotion revolution is spreading faster than anyone expected." David smiled. The aftermath of their desperate broadcast had been chaotic but ultimately wonderful. The Alien Council had embraced their newfound emotions immediately, crying and laughing and experiencing wonder for the first time in thousands of years. The other half had tried to maintain order, but it's hard to convince people to give up joy once they've rediscovered it. Within weeks, the alien society had split into 2 groups: those who wanted to explore emotions and those who wanted to suppress them again. The emotional aliens had been declared outcasts by the traditional leadership, but they didn't care. They were too busy feeling alive for the first time in millennia. "What about the other humans?" David asked. "The ones from the lab?" "Good news there too," Zara said, her voice brightening. "Dr. Chen says 3 more have recovered enough to start making their own choices about their futures. The emotional restoration therapy is working better than we hoped." David felt his heart warm. Saving the other human captives had been their first priority after establishing their refugee settlement, using the same consciousness bridge technology that had started their revolution. They'd been able to help the damaged humans reconnect with their emotions and memories. It wasn't perfect. Some of them were too damaged to ever fully recover, but many were healing. Some had chosen to return to Earth, while others had decided to stay and help build their new society. "Speaking of Dr. Chen," Zara continued, "she wanted to talk to you about the new arrival." "What new arrival?" Zara grinned, and David felt his heart skip a beat. Even after all this time, her smile could still make him feel like he was flying. The ship that came in this morning wasn't just carrying volunteers. It was carrying a delegation from Earth. David's eyes widened. "From Earth? But how did they remember those quantum signatures my ship was leaving? Your scientists have been tracking them. They've been trying to figure out what happened to you for months." David felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. What did they want? To talk, to learn, to see if the friendship between humans and my people can become something official. They walked together toward the settlement's main building, a structure that was part grown like alien technology and part built like human architecture. It was a perfect symbol of what they were creating here, a blend of different worlds and different ways of thinking. The delegation from Earth was waiting in the main meeting room. David recognized the uniforms. They were from the International Space Agency. There were 5 of them, and they all looked like they were trying very hard not to stare at everything around them. "David Rodriguez?" the leader asked, standing up as they entered. "I'm Director Walsh. We've been looking for you." "I'm here," David said simply, "though I'm not the same person who disappeared 6 months ago." "We can see that," Director Walsh said, glancing at Zara. "We've come to ask you some questions, and to make you an offer." "What kind of offer?" "The world knows about aliens now. We can't hide something this big, but we need someone who understands both sides. Someone who can help us navigate this new reality." She paused. "We want you to come home, David, to help us prepare humanity for contact with other species." David felt Zara's hand slip into his, and he squeezed it gently. "That's a generous offer, but this is my home now. David, think about what you could accomplish. You could help shape the future of human-alien relations. You can ensure that first contact goes smoothly, that both species benefit from the relationship. I am shaping the future, David said. Right here, we've created something that's never existed before, a true community of different species, living and working together as equals. Director Walsh looked around the room, taking in the mix of humans and aliens working side by side. This is impressive, but it's small scale. We're talking about changing the entire course of human history. So are we, Zara said, speaking for the first time. But we're doing it by example, not by politics. And you are? Director Walsh asked. I'm the alien who abducted your friend, Zara said with a smile, though I prefer to think of it as the best rescue mission in history. David laughed, and he noticed that several of the Earth delegation looked startled by the sound. Director Walsh, I appreciate what you're offering, but I can't go back. My life is here now, with Zara, building something new. But your expertise, your knowledge, humanity needs you. Humanity will be fine, David said. And if you really want to help prepare Earth for contact with other species, then study what we're building here. Learn from it. Take the model back with you, Director. Walsh was quiet for a moment. Then she said, what if we could arrange regular exchanges, Earth scientists coming here to learn? Some of your people visiting Earth, a gradual introduction instead of a sudden reveal? David looked at Zara, who nodded. That might work, he said, but only if it's done right. No more abductions, no more lab experiments. Equal partnership or nothing. Agreed, Director Walsh said quickly. We've learned from your experiences. We don't want to repeat the mistakes of the past. Over the next few hours, they worked out the details of a cultural exchange program. It would start small, a few scientists and diplomats from each side, but it had the potential to grow into something much bigger. As the Earth delegation prepared to leave, Director Walsh pulled David aside. Are you really happy here? Don't you miss Earth at all? David looked around at the bustling community they built. Humans and aliens working together, children of different species playing in the gardens. Couples like him and Zara who had found love across the boundaries of worlds. I miss some things about Earth, he said honestly. Pizza, baseball games, the sound of rain on windows. But Director, I've found something here that I never had on Earth, a sense of purpose. A community where I truly belong and love beyond anything I ever imagined possible. And you're sure this is what you want? David smiled as he saw Zara approaching, her skin glowing with happiness as she watched human and alien children chase each other through the gardens. 6 months ago, I was a lonely graduate student who spent his nights staring at stars and wondering if there was more to life than what I had. Now I'm part of something that's changing the universe, one friendship at a time. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. That evening, as the Earth ship departed with promises to return in 3 months with the first exchange group, David and Zara sat together on their favorite hillside, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Any regrets? Zara asked, curling up against his side. Only one, David said. And Zara looked up at him with concern. I regret that it took being abducted by aliens to find you, Zara laughed. That musical sound that never failed to make David's heart soar. Well, when you put it that way, it does seem like a rather inefficient way to meet. Worth every strange moment, though, David said, kissing the top of her head. As they sat there under alien stars, surrounded by the sounds of their thriving community, David reflected on how much his life had changed. He'd started as a captive, but he found freedom. He'd begun as a research subject, but he'd become a bridge between worlds. Most importantly, he found love in the most unexpected place possible, looking up at the stars. David no longer felt the loneliness that had defined his life on Earth. Instead, he felt connected to something vast and beautiful, not just to Zara, but to the entire universe and all the amazing life it contained. He'd been abducted by an alien beauty, and she was right. He truly never wanted to escape. This was where he belonged, and this was where his story would continue, one incredible day at a time.